Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin, Edinburgh morning.
Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, Adam Bradshaw, and it is an absolute honour to have you here back in the Strath studio on the Dram Association YouTube channel for another episode. And this is, again, part of our partnership with the Victoria Whisky Festival 2021, the festival that never physically happened, but is happening right now in your own living room, which is very exciting. We are having a bit of a bourbon weekend. If you tuned in a couple of days ago, we had Ray from Jim Beam join us, and today we have another very special guest. We have Raven Fuller from Michters. Welcome to the show, Raven.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I think you're going to be our first American guest, so welcome to the show. If you have any questions about how things are done here in Canada, please don't ask me. I'm from England, so we're both lost here. Have you been to the Victoria Festival before?
I have not. So I actually just started this gig in February of last year, so right pre-pandemic. So I have not had the chance to travel there yet with the border being closed.
Yeah, fair enough. And the festival always happens in January, so you narrowly missed out on last year's festival, which did actually happen, which was, I think, one of the few whiskey festivals that actually managed to happen in 2020.
That's good time.
Well, hopefully we'll get you across for the 2022 festival. I've been told it's going to happen. Come hell or high water, damn it. Well, obviously, if it's unsafe, it won't happen. But hopefully, fingers crossed, by then we'll be all right to actually have a festival again. And you're just a stone's throw away now, right? You're just the other side of the pond from us. Yes,
I am in Seattle, so not too far. The second I can be there, I will be.
And you know, it's super easy to get here from Seattle as well, because the hotel where the Whiskey Festival happens every year, the Hotel Grand Pacific, is actually literally across the road from the Clipper Terminal. You can literally take public transport to get here. It's great. Beautiful. So we are going to go through 5 different expressions of Michters today, and we're going to be asking Raven to tell us a little bit about each of them and a little bit of background about the brand itself. I guess that's probably a good place to start. What on earth is Michters?
Great question. We actually trace our history back to the first U.S. whiskey company known as Shanks, all the way back in 1753. So on our bottles, you'll see that established 1753, and our U.S. 1, that's what it stands for.
And I've never actually heard anyone say that out loud, so I'm glad I know how to say it now. I was just like, is it US star 1? Is it US number 1? Is it just US 1? You just ignore the star?
Ignore the star.
Perfect. Lovely. And so obviously you can tell from the accent that I'm from England, and I think I've just dropped it as well. We don't have, I don't have much of an experience with American whiskeys, I have to say. Until yesterday, when I recorded the video with Ray, I don't think we'd actually recorded any American whiskey content for this channel, which is frankly disturbing after a year, to be honest. But it's mostly been that I've always had this thing that I feel like I don't know enough about American whiskey to really talk about it. So hopefully with a little bit of Ray's guidance from yesterday and a little bit of your guidance, hopefully I'll be able to continue talking about American whiskey a little bit more in the future. One thing I did learn yesterday, though, which I think is a fantastic way to start this tasting, is that apparently rye whiskey predates bourbon whiskey.
It does. So that is kind of part of our story as well. We're originally from Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania. That's where the Shanks distillery was, and rye was just a much more popular grain to grow in that region. So rye whiskey and sour mash whiskey are really at the roots of who we are as a company.
Cool. With that, we may as well start with the straight rye then, I guess.
Absolutely.
So what does the label say on this one? Michters. So this is a single barrel expression.
Yeah, so every single thing that we make at Michters is either single barrel or truly small batch.
Nice.
So small batch has no legal definition. It can be as 1 barrel less than your standard batch, and you can call it small batch. It's one of the one things that's not truly overly regulated. But at Michters, everything we do is truly small batch. Our largest batch is going to be 20 full barrels, or the equivalent of. So truly, truly tiny, but all of our ryes are going to be single barrel.
And it's nice to hear the real small batch terms there, because Ray was saying yesterday, and I've not fact checked him on this, but apparently the first whiskeys to use the small batch were the small batch collection from Beam. So the Basil Haydens and the Knob Creek and all, and the Bookers and the Bakers, but they're not really that small batch, especially these days. I'm sure they started off much smaller, but yeah, 20 barrels is actually small batch.
No, every single thing that we do, really our whole mission is to make the best American whiskey we possibly can. We are so fortunate to be owned by a private family that truly is their passion. So cost be damned is literally a saying that we have like printed on things because we don't care the method it takes to get there. If it's going to cost a little bit more, we don't have to pay out dividends or anything like that at the end of the day. So we really can just focus on making some really good juice.
Nice, and that's one of the things coming from a more Scotch-centric perspective of looking at American whiskey is that the value for money is generally pretty damn impressive. And even with a line like Michters, which is objectively more expensive than many other bourbons on the market for the standard range, it's still incredibly good value compared to pretty much any other whiskey category in the world, apart from maybe Canadian.
Yeah, absolutely. I was really surprised just moving. I moved to Seattle from Louisville, and even just the difference in price and availability as you travel around the country, and I'm sure the rest of the world it's maddening. So yeah, it's a great value for.
If you think there's a fluctuation in price in American whiskeys in America, wait till you come see the price in Canada. Yeah. It's still very, very much worth it. I'm not trying to say, it's expensive, don't buy it. But the difference is quite eye-watering sometimes. But then again, it's the same the other way around. I saw an ad the other day for one of the states, there's not many, I don't think, that's one of the states that does allow reselling private sales of alcohol, had a bottle of one of the Canadian Club 42-year-olds, I think it was, and it was mind-blowingly expensive compared to the fact that you can still buy it here for $300.
Yeah, the secondary market is a little out of control, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, I'm going to pop this guy open and explore it a little bit. I have actually had all of these whiskeys before at one time or another, but I don't think I've ever had all 5 of these in one sitting, so it's going to be nice to be able to do a bit more of a compare and contrast.
All right.
And I do also appreciate the corks.
Yes.
There's something nice about having a cork in the whiskey, isn't there?
Yeah, every now and then I'll buy something that has a twist top, and it just doesn't feel quite the same.
No, it's not as satisfying.
So the rye is 84.8 proof.
That's actually a question for you.
Yeah.
Americans almost always talk in proof. Is it?
Oh, yeah.
Is that the legal standard down there, or do you have to put ABV on the bottles in America as well?
You have to put both, but I think it's just like still using inches and feet. It doesn't really make much sense, but
fair enough. At least you're not using the British naval proof, which has no real sense of anything anymore. It's
So this is pretty much our US 1 Kentucky Straight Rye. This is my daily drinker. So if I'm ever out and about and I'm not having a cocktail, this is my go-to. Very well-rounded. I really like the touch of dill that you get right before the end, that salinity in there. If you are drinking American whiskey, what is kind of your go-to? Are you more of a bourbon fan usually, or more on the rye side of things?
That's a tricky question. I like variety, to be honest. I like a little bit of everything. Although, as I was saying with Ray yesterday, it wasn't until relatively recently that I discovered the need and the purpose for American rye in the market here. It's one of the biggest mistakes I made when I first took over the whiskey sort of curation here at the Strath, is that why would anyone buy an American rye? We already have so many Canadian ryes. I'll trim down the American rye selection a little bit, bring in more, bourbons. It's like, no, it's a very different beast. For a start, anything that says rye on it in America has to be at least 51% corn. In Canada, it doesn't even actually rye. In Canada, Canadian rye doesn't actually even have to have any rye in it, ridiculously enough.
Yeah, American rye can be very polarizing because you're right. It can go all the way from 51% of rye grain all the way up to, it could be 99% rye grain. So with that really high rye content, we call that an Indiana style rye. So you're going to get a lot of heat, a lot of spice. We are on the Kentucky style of things. So we're closer to that 51%. We actually don't give out our mash bills. So I can't tell you the specific recipe, but there is still plenty of corn in our rye. So you're going to get that balance of the spice with a touch of that sweet too.
Are we allowed to say if there's any other grains in there, or is it entirely rye and corn?
Yeah, no, it is rye and 6-row malted barley and corn.
Cool.
That is for all of our expressions, just those 3 grains.
Ah, so it's just a different ratio on everything and different techniques. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah,
Lovely.
so we have 145 acres of farmland in Springfield, Kentucky, which isn't too far outside of Louisville, where we are working on growing all of our own grains. We've been doing it for a couple years now, but 2020 was the first year that our master distiller, Dan, finally gave us the stamp of approval. So we have really, really high qualifications. It all has to be USDA #1. So this was the first year that it surpassed our expectations. So we're working on getting all the way from farm to bottle, hopefully in the next couple of years.
That's very cool. And it's a big movement to be doing that right now. It's exciting to see so many people jumping on that.
Absolutely. We have really, really great partners when it comes to the grains and things that we're purchasing, but every single piece that you can control is just going to give you a better quality product at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. So I'm assuming Virgin American oak casks as per the usual.
Yes.
As per legally bound, I think, isn't it?
It does not have to be American oak, just an oak container. But yes, all of ours are American white oak. We also toast all of our barrels before they go into that charring process. So that is one of our processes that is a little bit different. We're not just having these special releases of toasted barrels. Every single drop of juice goes into a toasted and charred barrel.
So when you do have the special releases that say toasted, is that just extra toasted?
It is going into a secondary barrel that's toasted only. So the exact recipe of toast level is proprietary, but that's how we get to that next level.
Nice. And toast as opposed to char, which was very confusing trying to figure out the actual difference for that when I was first looking into that. Like, yeah. I thought it was just the same word, but no, apparently there's a very different part of the process.
Yeah, so toasting, just for anyone else who is not aware, is kind of a slow roasting period. So we're taking our barrels and putting them over a small stack of wood, same type of wood the barrel's made out of. You light that on fire, and it kind of slowly heats the barrel from the inside out. So this is bringing a lot of those sugars a little bit closer to the surface. And then when that process is over, then it goes into the charring, which is just a quick flash of flame to really give you that kind of alligatory skin consistency on the inside.
Nice. Yeah, I've been searching this thing for the dill that you mentioned, and yeah, I definitely get a certain herbaceous note, much more so than like rye. I was mentioning yesterday with Ray. I've always been taught basically to look for baking spice notes in rye, and that's kind of the first point of reference. Ray opened my eyes up to looking into trying to find tropical fruit notes as well, which is something I definitely find in here, but I certainly find much more herbal rather than spice notes, much more almost maybe fennel as well.
Yeah, a touch of that for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's delightful. Beautiful. So for anyone who hasn't tried sorry, I'll get the full name. The Michters Single Barrel Kentucky Straight Rye, US #1. Why does that fit in there? It's kind of hard to tell sometimes when the label's in a circle where the beginning and the end of the name is. But yeah, in some order, those words make up the name of this whiskey. But for anyone who hasn't tried this one before, we do have some available in the store right now. Regular price is $102.52. And for all of our Dram Association members right now, you can get it 10% off, $92.27, which is a great price for a single barrel rye. Yeah, you can pick that up right now while stocks last. That price is going to be available to you. And if you are watching this video a couple of months after it's aired, maybe, and you're like, I missed out on that special price. Well, don't worry. You can get 10% off all our whiskeys all the time simply by becoming a Dram Association premium member, and it costs only $10 a month. Beautiful. That's a great rye. Off to a strong start. So where are we moving to next?
Next, we will go into our, let's see, I'll say it in the whole form for you. Michters US one Kentucky straight bourbon.
Nice. Perfect.
And this is a small batch. So the last one was single barrel. This is small batch, no more than 20 full barrels.
Nice. So bourbon from an international perspective is kind of thought of as the American whiskey. And, you know, I think that's definitely not necessarily true in general, but it's certainly not true historically or even, you know, quantity wise. I don't think anymore. I don't know. Is bourbon still the biggest American whiskey in American eyes, or?
Yeah, I think so. Bourbon is definitely still king. When Joe Malioco, our current owner, brought the brand back in the 1990s, he was really dedicated to rye because of the history of it and because of our startings in Pennsylvania. So for him, it was really important to carry that through. And when the big bourbon boom happened, obviously we had bourbon to sell. So that's been great for us. But we still try to push our flagship of that rye, thinking it might be the next big thing. And I think we're starting to see that come around a bit.
Nice. Yeah. I've certainly been hearing an awful lot of murmurings about American rye in the last couple of years. But it's important to remember that, American rye is very good and it's becoming a bit of a sweetheart in the whiskey scene, but bourbon is, you know, it's not going anywhere.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And you were asking what sort of American whiskeys I would generally drink. And I have to admit, of these 5 whiskeys, this is the one I currently have on my shelf at home.
Fantastic.
Nice. It's always good to open a fresh bottle for the video anyway.
Isn't it? The noise is just beautiful. So this is 45.7%.
How do you land on the ABVs of Michters? Is it?
So almost everything that we do at Michters has a really intricate scientific explanation. Our Master of Maturation has a chemical engineering degree, and she is a brilliant woman, Andrea Wilson. But the proofs, however, they do not have a scientific story to them at all. Really, when they were all first starting, when we were first getting the brand off the ground, they kind of sat all in a room with their own individual favorites and which ones they kind of lean to, tried to argue their points and have everyone try the different alcohol percentages, and really no one could be swayed. So they just picked an average of everyone's favorites, and that's where we landed.
It's a very democratic process. I like that.
Exactly.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, like when it comes to what ABV is going to be best, it's mostly down to a personal taste. There's a lot of whiskeys that will choose a very, very specific ABV to the decimal place, just like this one, where it's, you know, the master distiller has meticulously sat there and gone through every single sample and decided this is how it should be drunk. I don't like being told how something should be drunk. I like having the option of, if I want to add a bit of water to it, I can. If I want to be able to do whatever, I can. So I'm always very happy when I see a whiskey that is a little bit, you know, higher than the norm. 45.7 is nice. It gives you a bit of room to play with, because frankly, as much as I keep being told by especially a lot of Scottish people that, you can put a ton of water in there. Master blenders, they'll water it down to like 17% alcohol, and that's great if your aim is looking for flaws in a whiskey. You can do that. That's what the master blenders are doing. It's not necessarily the most enjoyable drink. Although, actually, where I first got into whiskey when I was working in a bar in Edinburgh, the folk musicians there, for some reason, their standard drink was getting a triple blended scotch in a pony glass, which is a third of a pint, and topping it up with water. So it kind of made it like 25% ABV. That's a little watery for me. So being able to play around with the ABV somewhere in between 35 and 45 is always nice. And if a whiskey comes out at 40, I'm not able to really do that. So having something at 45.7 is a nice touch.
Definitely a bit of a purist when it comes to trying something for the first time. So I want to try it how the distiller wanted it to be enjoyed. But then after that, it's whatever you like. If you need to add an ice cube or 3, if you need to add some soda in there, I'm not here to judge. Whatever makes you happy.
Totally. I mean, there's a huge difference between sort of studying a whiskey and enjoying a whiskey. I mean, if we're doing this as a hobby or as a job for us, you want to be able to have it at, the intended way that it was presented. And you want to be able to play around with it a little bit. But when it comes to actually sitting down and enjoying the stuff, do whatever the hell you want. Like if you want, like, so long as you paid for the bottle, if you want to add Dr. Pepper to it, I'm not going to judge. But don't claim to be saying that you're doing it because that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, so for me, our bourbon is a caramel bomb. Very, very sweet. Still well-rounded. You still get a touch of the heat. A little bit of oak comes through at the end.
Yeah. One of the things I like about this bourbon particularly is I find it to be the right amount of, like, just slightly more tannic than you expect. So it's not like overly tannic. I'm not trying to say it's over oaked or anything, but it's interestingly tannic. Like you notice it and then go, oh yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
A nice drying sensation.
So one thing that we do to our barrels before they ever even go through the toasting and charred process is that they're all air dried and seasoned for months and months and months. So before they're even cut into staves, they're just long pillars that sit outside and go through all of the Kentucky seasons you can imagine. So super duper warm, rain, snow, critters, all of that. And that actually helps pull out a lot of the tannins from the wood throughout that process, which I think when it comes down to actually tasting the whiskey at the end, we get to really pick out what flavors we want to highlight rather than just being overwhelmed by that astringent kind of acidity sometimes.
Yeah, and like fluctuations are such a huge thing in whiskey maturation, which isn't really an issue in Scotland because, in Scotland it's generally the whole year is basically about a 15-degree swing from each other. It's not the most fluctuating weather patterns, but obviously in the States and especially in the southern states, it can be quite varied, right? I mean, especially right now in the middle of the winter storm, that's going to have an interesting effect on the whiskey of this year.
Oh yeah, they've had a really bad ice storm the last couple of weeks, so power outages and all that kind of stuff, and it just it gets you excited for 5 years from now. I wonder what that year's whiskey is going to taste like and how it's going to be different.
And it's also, that the fact that the fluctuations and the seasons have such an effect on the whiskey, I feel has sort of defined the styles of American whiskey quite a lot as well. I mean, especially like if you look at something like the Bottled in Bond Act, where they actually stipulate that it's all from the same season because they know that a different season's whiskey is going to be different because of how many cycles it's been through and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, one of the coolest things that we do is we do heat cycling within our warehouses. So if you've been to old rick houses, usually they're dirt floors, they're wood beams, absolutely beautiful. Ours are beautiful, but in a very different way. All of ours are stainless steel and concrete. And we do that so during these winter months, we can add cycles into that aging process. So when the temperature outside isn't naturally fluctuating as much, we fill our entire warehouses with steam, monitor the barrels to make sure they're all aging at about the same rate. They're only about 3 to 4 stories tall too. So we don't have some of these kind of like honey pots that other places will have. Oh, if you get the barrel on the 3rd floor in the back corner, that's the best one. Our whole goal is continuity of the entire house. So we can match that quality from batch to batch.
Nice. And that's in direct contrast to what Ray was saying yesterday with Beam, where there's about a 20-degree swing between the top and the bottom. It's like, it's horrifying. That's really cool. And it's interesting as well, because from a Scottish perspective, there's one company which I always found really, really interesting for the maturation techniques. Have you ever come across Michel Couvrier? They're very, very strange. It's a crazy Belgian fellow. He unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. He started this company where he bought basically virgin spirits from Scotland and then took them to a network of caves that he owned in Bordeaux, I think it was, somewhere in France. And he would actually meticulously move the barrels around from different sections of the caves that were different consistent temperatures to mimic like the seasons changing and do it faster than the seasons actually changed. It's like, basically you're doing exactly the same thing, but with much better technology.
Caves, but so interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Nice. Yeah. So if if you are thinking that it's time to stock up on bourbons, I think this is a great bourbon to have, not only as a sipper, but I think this makes a great base for a lot of cocktails as well. Would you make any cocktails out of this one yourself?
All of them, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I definitely am usually ordering a cocktail with a rye. For me, the bourbon is already sweet on its own, so if I order that, it's usually going to be neat. But yeah, Manhattan is usually one of my go-to drink bourbons.
Beautiful. Yeah. I would, what I like to do with the Michters bourbon is I find, because of that extra little touch of sweetness, I like making an old fashioned with very, very little sugars. Like use half a sugar cube instead of a full sugar cube. I think that works quite nicely. But yeah, if you're looking to stock up on a bit of bourbon right now, this one is also available exactly the same price as the rye, actually. So consistent right there. 102.52, now 92.27. We do have stock available at strathliquor.com. Make sure you're a Dram Association member to get the discount. If you're not already a Dram Association member, joining is very, very easy. You'll see a link at the top of the page that says clubs, and you'll see another link from there that says Dram Association, and just follow the links until you remember. It's easy as that. Lovely. So before we move on to the next whiskey, Raven, it's time to do a little thing that we've been doing in this series of special guest tastings, where we get to know you a little bit better. Because the whole thing about the whiskey is, it's not just a drink, it's a hobby, but it's also a community. So one thing that we're really missing out on with the Whiskey Festival not happening from an industry standard perspective is that we're not getting this whole, get to know each other kind of thing. And it would have been lovely to have shared a dram with you last month over here in Victoria. But in the meantime, let's get to know you a little bit. So 2 questions for you. How did you get into whiskey? What's your little whiskey background? And also, outside of your own portfolio, and do you have a favorite brand or distillery?
All right. Tricky. So my whiskey story, I actually used to work in local government. I'm originally from Illinois. So there I did a lot of event planning, community work. And I was just ready to live in a bigger city. So I decided, which Louisville is not huge, but bigger than where I was living previously. So moved down to Louisville and very quickly realized just how much bourbon and the government there go hand in hand. I mean, it is tourism. It is everything. So I realized I could take my background in government and do something that I had an equal passion for. So I started working at Michters a little over 2 years ago. And so they hadn't quite opened their downtown distillery yet. That's where they host their public tours. They also operate the distillery down there as well. But so to start training us, they put us through every single level of operations training. So I was on the bottling line for months, in processing, in the distillery itself. So really, really made sure that not only are we just, they were always really much didn't want us to memorize a script and just regurgitate it. They really wanted us to understand every single part of the process, and just be able to share our passion for it. So I lived in Louisville for a couple of years. And then I had an opportunity to move to Seattle. And yeah, they let me come out here and do it. So it's been great. And then as far as my favorite whiskey outside of the Michters portfolio, this one is hard only because those are all my best friends. I mean, truly one of the things I miss about Kentucky is that almost everybody works in the industry. So somebody who works at this distillery and that distillery. I mean, I have multiple beams that I'm friends with.
If it helps you make sure that you're not feeling like you're having to pick through friends, I can add the stipulation of outside of America if you like.
Well, what I was going to was going to be Woodenville. So it's a small distillery in Washington that I had heard of before I moved here, but I had never tried it. So one of the first things I did when I moved here is I wanted to figure out what the local scene was like, and had an opportunity to drink the Woodenville Rye, and I really, really enjoy it. So I would say that's probably my favorite right now outside of Michter.
Nice. Awesome. Support local. And it's an interesting thing for Washington whiskies as well, because I've enjoyed quite a few whiskies from Washington. We have the Washington Dry Fly up here occasionally. I like a good wheated whiskey. But funnily enough, one of my personal favorite bourbons is actually from Illinois.
Who is it?
It's from Wheeling, Illinois.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, a company called Opidan. And one of the reasons I like them is that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do very much enjoy like bourbon flavored bourbon, but they experiment an awful lot, very much in a sort of Scottish style. So one of their main products is a bourbon that has been fully matured in virgin oak casks, and then it's been finished in a Solera vat made of French and Spanish oak. And it's like the perfect hybrid between bourbon and Scotch, and I like that playfulness. So yeah, next time you're visiting back home, check out Opidan over in Wheeling.
Okay. I will. Thank you.
Beautiful. And let's carry on with the Michters story. Next up, we are going for sour mash, I think.
Yeah.
that seems right. Beautiful. Sour mash. So I'm looking forward to hearing again the ins and outs of what makes a sour mash, because it's one of those things that for some reason I've heard several times and can never fully remember enough to explain. It's, but yeah, it's certainly a style of whiskey that I've enjoyed. There's very, very few people putting sour mashes out, though, especially that are available here in BC. I think there's only 3 brands that I've come across in BC that make a sour mash. So it's nice to be able to have a good quality sour mash available in the market here. Yeah.
So sour mash is tricky, kind of to remember and regurgitate. And for me, I like to think of it as kind of 2 separate but equal parts. So the first is the actual sour mash process. So we're using that process for all of our expressions. And that's essentially taking some of the back set from your first run and recycling it back into your next batch. So very similar to like a sour mash bread or a friendship bread. You're kind of passing on that previous story to the next one. It's going to help with pH levels. It's going to help with consistency. But for us, the reason this one is named sour mash is because there is no dominant grain in the mash bill. So it doesn't reach that 51% corn, so you can't call it a bourbon. It's not 51% or more rye, so you can't call it a rye. It's right there in the middle. So sour mash is the name that it's received.
And I've been paying attention and I'm learning. You said that all the mash bills have the same 3 ingredients. So that means there's an awful lot of barley in this one, comparatively.
There are a lot of guesses as to the very specific recipe on this one, but I am sworn to secrecy.
Nice. Beautiful. Well, this is the one I'm probably least familiar with out of the US one. I keep wanting to call it US number 1, the US 1 range. Always happy to revisit it though.
So this one is 43%. And for me, it really starts off like the bourbon. So you're going to get that really warm, rich caramel, and then it finishes with a touch of spice on the end, just like the rye. So kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I almost want to get creative and get another Glencairn out and pour a little bit of bourbon and rye together to blend and see if it turns out like the sour mash. It does feel kind of the middle ground between them. Nice. It's, dare I say, creamier?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. Definitely a touch of that. The mouthfeel is a little bit more all-encompassing. Hits every little point on the tongue. I really like to revisit this one and take really small sips because it changes just a touch every single time.
Nice.
This was actually Whiskey of the Year in 2019, either 18 or 19, by the Whiskey Exchange. It was the first U.S. product to even get into the top 10. So we are very, very proud of her.
That is extremely good news. I haven't visited the UK in far too long. I was meant to be going last year, actually. And I was noticing last time I went, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I was starting to see more and more American brands on the shelves there. When I was growing up in Yorkshire and up in Edinburgh, I really only remember seeing 3 brands of American whiskey. Yeah. And no offense, but none of them were Michters. It didn't make it that far. I'm really happy to hear that they are available on a little bit more of a global scale now. Is it available sort of worldwide? Can you find this in like Germany and Australia and Singapore and places now as well?
Yeah, we are in over 52 countries. We are in every U.S. state. So we're definitely growing and picking up some new countries every year if we can.
It's excellent news. It's always good to see good whiskey spreading its wings and becoming more available everywhere. Nice. Variety is the spice of life.
Absolutely.
Nice. So I'm hard picked. I've been playing the game in my head as I go along to figure out which one of these is actually my favorite. Because like I said, it's I think this is the first time actually trying all of them together in a row. It's kind of hard to say. I mean, they've all got different quirks of their personality, but they're all not in terms of flavor profile. I mean, they're vaguely similar in terms of flavor profile because there's only so much difference you can get with, the same grains and the same sort of oak and whatnot. But they all have the same kind of consistent quality, which is good. I honestly find it hard. I think maybe the sour mash, but that might be just because that's the most recent one I've had. Do you have a favorite out of the three we've had so far?
Mine changes as well. It definitely changes with the mood I'm in. Consistently, I come back to the rye. But yeah, every now and then I'll go through a sour mash phase or a bourbon phase or whatever bottle's open at the time.
Fair enough. My favorite whiskey is the one in my hand, right? That's the that's the way it goes. Lovely. Sour mash is also available at the Strath right now. This one is 107.74 regularly, down to 96.97 right now for the remaining stock for the next little while. Again, all you have to do to be able to get that special price is join our free whiskey club, the Dram Association, which you can join right now at strathliquor.com. And that's the last time I'm going to be saying that, because these next two whiskeys that we've got actually aren't available right now. The next whiskey is the American Unblended, which I'm sure will become available at the Strath again at sometime soon. If you're looking forward to it, let me know, shoot me an email, and I'll let you know as soon as it comes back on the shelf. But I'm looking forward to trying it anyway.
So American is a little bit of a rebel. So it almost counts as a bourbon, but it breaks one of the regulations. So we can't technically call it a bourbon. And that is that a portion of this small batch is then placed into our own once used bourbon barrels, and then it's married back together. So because of that method, it's a little bit lighter on your palate. This is definitely probably the sweetest of what we'll try today, lower proof as well. I always say this is a really, really great place to start if you're trying to get somebody interested in the American whiskey genre. It's not too intense. So if you have a virgin palate, this isn't going to completely blow it out.
Cool. That sounds excellent. And of course, again, sorry to keep bringing up the S word, but from a Scotch perspective, using ex-bourbon barrels is just completely the norm. So I'm sure there's a lot of people in America going, oh, you can't do that. But I'm like, oh, yeah, bring it on. It's great. Very nice. Yeah, it even smells a little sweeter on the nose, eh? Almost like confectioner's sugar, like powdered sugar. So why the specific stipulation of unblended? What would happen if it was a blended American whiskey?
So legally in America, if you have a blended whiskey, that means you could have grain neutral spirits in it. It doesn't have to all be whiskey. So
Really?
we put that on the label just to make it very clear that it's not a bourbon because of the method in which we create it, but it's a bourbon by mash bill, and it is all whiskey inside that bottle. We're not adding anything else into there.
Wow. Is that something that's actually, like, do people make like a blended American whiskey? Is that something that people still do, or?
Yeah, I don't think they're bragging. The people who are doing are not bragging about it by any means. It's not. No,
it's probably, I'm sure, the $6 half size bottles behind the counter kind of stuff. That's really interesting, because the place, of course, that comes to mind mostly for that kind of practice is India, where it's the biggest whiskey market in the world, but like 99.7% of their whiskey is mostly actually molasses based, which is. Yeah, it's whiskey.
Did you see, I think it was just yesterday, I saw an article about they're going to start putting some more regulations on Japanese whiskey for some of the same reason. So I think it'll be interesting to see who comes out of that after.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was actually talking about that yesterday with Ray. I saw it in the morning before I filmed with Ray. And of course, it impacts him quite a lot because he works with Beam Suntory, and the Suntory part of that is quite Japanese. I think a lot of companies are going to be like, oh, what do we do now? I think they're going to have to change their branding somewhat and figure out what's next. Because a lot of Japanese whiskey is some of it is made in Japan, but it's bumped up a lot with actually Canadian whiskey, an awful lot of Alberta Premium, and an awful lot of Scottish whiskey, and even the big names like Nika. A lot of that is actually Ben Nevis because they own the Ben Nevis distillery in the Highlands. So with a blended American whiskey, could they theoretically put spirit that wasn't even made in America? Or does it have to still be made in America, even though it's crappy spirit?
I think if it was just whiskey, you'd be fine. It's only when you put the word bourbon on it that comes into play a little bit more.
Fair enough. Yeah. Cool. Oh yeah, this is zestier. It's not quite orangey, but maybe like a mandarin or something.
Yeah, definitely some different fruits in there. I usually get a touch of overripe plum, a little bit of cherry. Just depends on what I've also eaten the rest of the day.
Of course, and that's one of the main things with whiskey. Of course, is it will change depending on what else you've had. These whiskeys, this might taste completely different if I hadn't have just had the sour mash before it, for example. And that's one of the beautiful things about having a larger collection of whiskey at home is every time you have a whiskey, it's going to be completely different based on the time of day, what mood you're in, what you've eaten, what you've drunk before. And if you took each one of these whiskeys home today and you got all four, you don't actually have four whiskeys. You've got like four, times 4 times 4, I think, whatever the math works out at. I did have a math degree once upon a time. I've forgotten almost all of it. Well, four with an exclamation mark after. You'd have that many different combinations of whiskeys because this is going to taste different after this. It's going to taste different after this. It's even going to taste different after having both of them together before this. That's the beautiful thing about having so much whiskey. And of course, whiskey doesn't really go bad in the bottle. I mean, it does eventually, but you're going to outlive it probably.
We have a tasting team in Louisville of about 20 folks who every single run have to approve it and quality test it. And they always do it first thing in the morning so that they haven't had any coffee even yet. So their palate is as blank as possible. But I can never get used to drinking at 8 a.m.
Gives you the rest of the day to sober up.
Yeah.
You have a hangover with your dinner. Yeah. Lovely. So yes, like I said, this one's unfortunately not available right now. Hopefully it will be available again in the future. Keep an eye on stratliquor.com for it and send me a request via email if you're looking to try and secure a bottle in advance. It, I assume, is about the same price. It's somewhere in that 105-ish kind of range. Very, very special whiskey. Before we move on to the last whiskey today, I do just want to mention, first of all, we are selling these glasses. This is the official 2021 Victoria Whisky Festival glass, which we had made for the festival that unfortunately then couldn't go ahead because of the pandemic. If you would like to support this month's charity, you can go to stratliquor.com and buy some of these glasses, and all of the proceeds are going to the charity. If you go to stratliquor.com and there's no glasses left available, don't worry, because in a couple of weeks we'll be announcing next month's charity, and we reserved a section of glasses for each month. So they're not completely gone. They've still got another chance in March to support next month's charity. But if there are still some available, you can support the Victoria Child Abuse Prevention and Counselling Centre, formerly known as the Mary Manning Centre. That is this month's charity. And if you feel like just donating without getting a glass, there's a big donate button as well. So you can chime in there. As well as the proceeds from any donations from the participants of this tasting as well. So thank you very much for helping us support local charities.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for involving us. I'm glad that people are still trying to find a way to make things work, even in this uncertain world.
Absolutely. Restrictions breed creativity. I think it's there's always a different and interesting way you can do things.
Absolutely.
And the final whiskey today is one that I am very excited to try again. So in the summer, actually, I can't believe it's taken this long. A huge shout out to James from Authentic for helping to organize this tasting and taking care of the bottles as well. He's always a fantastic guy to deal with, and we're going to be doing a lot more authentic tastings, I like that, throughout the rest of this season as well, supporting other charities throughout the rest of the months. He brought me a little care package. We did a bit of a sample swap a few months ago when he came across in the summer, and, he popped into the store and we were all, masked and gloved up and like, oh, we shouldn't be here. And we dropped off a little box for each other full of little vials. And in the box that I got from him, I frankly, I was mostly looking forward to a lot of the very special edition compass boxes and things. But there was one vial in there that absolutely blew me away. I had no idea how good it was until I had that little sample. And that was the Michters 10-year-old bourbon. Oh my God, this is good. Unfortunately, it's so good that we can't get any. There's none available at the Straff right now. I'm going to be petitioning to be able to make sure we're first ballot recipients of the next batch. James, if you're watching this, that please let us have some next time. There are a couple of places around BC where they still do have some stock from the last shipment. So if you do fall in love with this whiskey, please do help support Michters and support Authentic. Pick up a bottle. You should be looking around $220 here in BC for this bottle. And yeah, I'm going to see if I can open this wax. Come on, work with me here. I don't know which way I'm supposed to be tearing.
You might need a wine key. I usually tear mine at the beginning or cut mine at the beginning. So
that's not a bad idea, actually. I think I might have one somewhere around. Tell you what, how about you start telling people about this whiskey and I'll come back in a second with an open bottle.
Great.
Beautiful.
All right. This one is 47.2% alcohol. Very, very, it's my favorite. So I'm going to take my time to sip on it here. One thing I will say about our 10-year, our master of maturation, Andrea, and our master distiller, Dan, are very much sticklers for perfection. And that is really what they're striving for with every single release. But the 10-year is extra special in that regard. And it's not always just 10-year that's going into the bottle. So Andrea's not really a big fan of the idea of these like birthday style where it's 10 years in a day and it's going into a bottle no matter what. There have actually been years where we haven't had a release because it just wasn't ready or it wasn't hitting that expectation that she wanted to see. So with that, especially the 2019 and the 2020 have some barrels in here that are up to about 13 years old. So when it says 10-year-old, that's the bare minimum, and it's only going to go up both in quality and in flavor from there. Oh, I think we have an open bottle.
I have 20D678. I don't know which one you have, but
I have 20G.
20G, lovely. Yeah, always fun to get single barrel whiskeys. I like tracking the variants and things. The higher proof on this is very exciting as well. Ooh, lovely. Excellent. Glorious. And it's an interesting thing because I have had very, very few bourbon whiskeys that are double digits that I've enjoyed. To be honest, I find older bourbons to be often cloyingly tannic, and especially the I don't know if I should name names, but you can probably guess from where I'm going with this. Some of the whiskeys that you just can't really buy without having to spend 5 figures that people get really excited about. I've had the opportunity to try a few, and to be honest, I mostly wish I hadn't. So it's really quite a new thing in the last couple of years that I've actually found a few older bourbons which I really enjoy, and this is absolutely one of them. Funnily enough, the other one is the Basil Hayden 10 as well. Yeah, I find anything older than like 10 or 12 is kind of goes downhill relatively fast. So it's amazing that they've managed to get that close to the edge of the cliff and remain on the cliff. And you got the beautiful view and you got the horizon without falling to your death. And I think that's a really tricky thing, especially with bourbon, because at any given second, it could suddenly all go to shit.
There's a huge misconception that age equals quality no matter what. And there are plenty of antique or vintage bottles that you open up and they're terrible. So it really is all about the process that you're using to make it. There's a peak of every single barrel where it's going to start taking on notes that you don't exactly appreciate or you don't want to go into, whether it's a single barrel or a small batch. So having the education and the experience to know when a barrel is ready or when one can wait a couple more years and possibly go into the 10 or the 20-year product or something even older it's definitely a combination of art and science. And you are totally right. You got to get right close to that edge and not go too far. So.
Absolutely. So there's a strong memory linked with the aroma of this whiskey for me. And that is an old roommate of mine when I lived in Edinburgh. Used to enjoy the occasional cigar. It was very much a special occasion thing for him. He had a beautiful big wooden humidor thing, and I don't know if it's an actual thing you're supposed to do. I'm not really big on the whole tobacco scene, but he would always put dried orange peel in the box in the humidor with it. Anytime he would open that box and the aroma of the orange peel and the tobacco and the wood, that is what I'm getting on the nose here, and it's just glorious. Would you say that it's common for bourbons to reduce in sweetness when they get older? Is that a common thing? It's something I feel like I've noticed, but I've not had that much experience with them.
I wouldn't say that I think that they reduce in sweetness, as in they more so just take on other flavors that are a touch more powerful. So oak and smoke, those are always going to be a little bit stronger, at least on my palate. I'm going to pick those out more easily than I am maybe some of that green apple or that vanilla. So once they start to get a touch older, I think it's more of playing with the same flavors as far as which one's in center stage. But no, I mean, I still think the 10-year bourbon has got a touch of that sweetness to it on the back end, especially if you're having it side by side with the 10-year rye, because you're going to get a lot more oak, a lot more spice, a lot more of those cooking spices that we talked about earlier. But again, we're also trying this right after American, which is one of our sweeter expressions. So that may make it seem even less sweet to you in that.
Maybe you should go back and try the bourbon actually and do a side-by-side between the two.
Absolutely.
Because I think before I do the side-by-side, what I'm expecting, what I feel like I'm getting is the difference between the bourbon, the 10-year and the regular expression, is I feel like 10-year it's bolder, yes, but it's also more complex. I think there's more fatty esters, there's more things going on. Mm-hmm. Interesting. The regular, the straight bourbon, after going back to it, the first thing I got was a little bit of smoky bacon, which is interesting. Didn't get that the first time. Yeah.
It's funny too when tasting. The second somebody says something, it's hard to taste or smell anything other than that.
Yes.
I've bacon, and I've never gotten bacon.
The power of suggestion is a big thing. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about whiskey as an entire category, no matter what type of whiskey you've got, so long as it's not, made of molasses. The whole thing of whiskey is that it's incredibly chemically complex. Anything that's got even just a little bit of malted barley in it is going to have a huge amount of complex flavor compounds going into it. Rye and corn is only going to add to the variety, and the amount that you get out of the oak as well, and different types of oak. There's just so many flavor compounds in this glass here right now that every single person on the planet is going to taste something slightly different in it, and that's just incredible. Yeah, 2 thumbs up on that. That's every bit as good as I remember from the little vial.
Good. So at the end of this, what do you think is your favorite? Where are you leaning?
I mean, this one. But being that this one is not always available, out of the regular 4, I think probably the sour mash, to be honest. I think that's probably where I'm landing. And it's probably not what I would have expected, but yeah, that's what I'm going with.
That's awesome.
So for everyone who is taking part in this tasting as well, I should mention that with these charity tastings, we are teaming up with local independent whiskey clubs who are completely separate from the Strath Liquor Store, who are going to be enjoying these bottles and then donating on their own behalf to our charity as well. So for those of you who have tasted along with these whiskeys, please do let us know in the comments section or in the live chat as well which one's your favorite. And I should have mentioned that we have a live chat. I don't think I mentioned that with Ray either. So these videos are actually going out at a specific time. So if you're a Dram Association member, keep an eye on your email or subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to see when the next one is. If you catch it at the premiere, there is a big live chat where the whole community will be joining in and chatting with each other during the video as well. So there's always some very interesting conversations going on in the live chat. Yeah, this has been absolutely glorious. Thank you very much, Raven. It's been a beautiful little tasting.
I agree. Great way to spend my afternoon.
And the snow's finally melted. You can go outside now. Beautiful. So thank you for joining us, everyone. We will see you next month with a brand new charity and a brand new set of tastings. At the time of recording, I actually have no idea what's next. I know actually we have the SNWS Outturn, of course, we do every month. We're going to have 7 brand new Scotch Malt Whisky Society whiskies being released here on Drinking Out Loud on the first Friday of March, which I think is the 5th. And then what's after that is a complete mystery. I've got some idea of what's coming up, but I don't know in what order. So keep an eye in your inbox for the news and stay well, stay safe. And thank you, Raven.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye.